So the last strong ones who have made it to the end of our, let's say, insightful day. There's a lot of new information, new interesting information we heard today. But now let's move on to the last presentation of today. And you can already see it on the screen as well. So now we're going to talk about Tallinn. So let's give a round of applause to Uwe Bacher.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, talking about Tallinn, but I also would like to take you onto a journey on how to get all this data that we spoke about. What about aerial mapping? What about flying over a city? How to get the data? And I want to show you what we did and what is possible. So I come from a company, so as usual, does this work? No. We have one slide, but it won't move.
It's okay.
Okay. Yeah, let's start with me. I'm Uwe Bacher. I'm working for Hexagon company as a technical director in the Innovation Hub. So we are doing new developments, new innovations inside Hexagon. What Hexagon is, I will show you a bit later. This project was performed by the Department for Geospatial Content Solution together with the city or for the city of Tallinn. No, that's... Maybe I'm wrong. Which ones?
The big screen.
The big ones. Perfect. Okay, let's start a bit with Hexagon. We are a really big company dealing completely with all that is about digital reality solutions. So meaning, and we saw this quite a lot today, the connection, the feedback loop between real world and the digital twin, bringing this together into something that we call smart digital reality. So coming from the real world into the digital world, doing the visualization, defining actions, taking our analysis out of this. All these workflows are inside Hexagon. We are quite large. We are more than 20,000 people these days. A lot of R&D, a lot of innovation, also and always with a focus on sustainability to integrate into our strategy. So where is this located, this project? It is coming from the Geosystems department. And here we have three pillars. It's the airborne sensor technology. So we build the airborne sensors. We create content and we have mapping services. And between all three of these pillars, this project was integrated. So if you look into all this aerial mapping and these things, there are a lot of changes going on. There are a lot of trends, faster refresh cycles. You all see it if you want to map a city. These days, the cities want to have a new updated model or data set every year, some cities even twice a year. The cost pressure is quite high. We want to have higher resolution and the areas get larger and larger. So this is a bit what we see in the market, and this drives our development into efficient capturing, efficient processing, and accessibility to the data and to the results for everyone, if possible. So our mission inside Hexagon is to have airborne data for smart cities for digital twins. Here, an example from Manhattan. It's a point cloud from a LiDAR scanner in this case. Digital twin, why do we do it? And we heard this often today, you can only manage what you know. I think this is really important. If you don't know what you have, you are not able to manage it. And this, again, also a definition for a digital twin, but I will skip this one and go to this slide. For me, it's an infinity loop, all this digital twin thing. You have data, you have analysis, you have action, and the world is always changing. So this loop is ongoing, and for sure we have our more static data, we have real-time data from sensors, from whatever. We have our mostly used by artificial intelligence, the analysis, and we have the action. The action often means that we have a dashboard for the decision makers that really drive the action and see what will come. Here, a little example from traffic management in Frankfurt this time. So what we have at Hexagon, we have a lot of technology available, and we want to provide the right sensor to get the base data for your digital twin. That means digital twin lives in some kind of environment, and we see, for example, the aerial mapping data as a kind of a framework for your digital twin. So we have quite a portfolio of sensors that we can use. It starts from hybrid sensors, it's aerial imaging sensors, LiDAR sensors, but also bathymetric sensors. That's all for aircraft carried sensors, so they are quite heavy. It's about 50 to 80 kilograms, so nothing for drones. That's for the real aircraft. On the other side, we have sensors that are more on the ground. It's the terrestrial mapping, it's the mobile mapping, it's the, for example, BLK2Go or laser scanner that you can just carry on. It's this nice robot dog or other sensors that you just can carry on. And this brings me more to the project for modeling a city. If you just look from the air, you have a certain perspective. The air is best to give you the roofs, a bit of the facades, but you don't see everything. You always have some occlusions. So in the end, if you combine different data sets to get, or different source data, you get really the best models. What we do, we combine, for example, LiDAR, oblique imagery, and nadir imagery, but I will show it a bit later as well. And that brings me to one sensor, and I will describe the hybrid initiative, as we call it. It's the evolution of sensors. And I do this because that was the sensor that was used for this project. And if you look a bit back in history, how aerial mapping, how aerial photogrammetry evolved over the last, it's now more than 100 years. It started with handheld cameras, analog cameras. It went into somehow standardized aerial cameras. The first digital scanners came up in the 2000s, and now they are really operational. So the transition, at least from an analog camera into the digital world, was pretty fast within the last 25 years. On the other side, we have LiDAR scanners that are a bit younger from a history point of view. It's now about 30 years that they are in the market. And as everything gets smaller and technology became more powerful, it was a logical step to combine all these sensors into one pot and to design a hybrid sensor that consists of really cameras and LiDAR systems. And we define something like this as non-compromise, always taking the best from the class, best cameras, the best LiDAR sensors, to build a so-called hybrid sensor, where we, in this case, the case of a city mapper, as I said, that was used here. We have nadir cameras that look straight down. We have oblique cameras that have a 45 degrees oblique angle to see pretty well the facades. We have 4 of them, so one looks forward, one backward, one to the left, and one to the right side. And in addition to this, we have a LiDAR scanner that is an active system that gives you directly a 3D point cloud. And all this is combined into a very clever system where the components are well adjusted in a way that the point density of the LiDAR fits very well with the GSDs, or the resolution of the image data. If you look into the acquisition of such data in a city mapping project, we use our LiDAR to get the 3D data. We can look underneath vegetation, so we get ground, we get vegetation surface data, we get quite well also vertical structures, because we use a kind of a circular scan pattern that looks also a bit oblique. That's the LiDAR. We have the nadir data that has the classical photogrammetric view from top that gives you all the details, all the information from the rooftops. So it's the perfect thing for example, modeling in detail the roofs, but also giving us a texture for the roofs and for the plane. And we have the oblique cameras that look with a 45 degree into the scene, and that gives you a lot of information of the facades. We can use it to detailed modeling the facades, and that's important for the project here, to texturize our 3D models with a real texture to see how they really look like. We don't want to have, at least not for the LOD2 models, artificial texture, but we want to have the real texture from the imagery. So if we put the two sensors together, or the two kinds of sensors, image data and LiDAR data, they are very complementary. So usually if you look, image data has a lot of details. It's very fine, granular in the XY plane, so in the horizontal plane. It has also a very high accuracy in the horizontal plane. That's a big advantage. You can map a lot of details. The disadvantage is if you want to do 3D with imagery, you always need two images of the same place, and you need a lot of light because it's a passive sensor. It needs sunlight, and if you imagine a city environment, you very often have very narrow streets. It's dark. It's a limited texture, so that's not always the perfect sensor to model down to the ground in narrow streets. But therefore, we have the LiDAR, what has a really high accuracy in the height component, and it's an active sensor. You just need one shot of your LiDAR scanner coming back from the ground, and you have a 3D point. So combining these two gives the best of two worlds. We have, I would say, no disadvantages combining it, and having it in the same sensor has the good thing, everything is collected simultaneously. Same trajectory of your aircraft, same situation on ground. That means if there is a construction going on, you see it in the LiDAR data and in the image data. You even see the cars stopping in front of the traffic light in both data sets. That helps you filtering and analyzing the data very well. Looking a bit what it means, I already mentioned, you have the occlusions in narrow street canyons. There, the LiDAR gives you a lot of advantage. You can look underneath the vegetation with your LiDAR, so you really get the ground. And if you have the ground and the top of the vegetation, you can perfectly model trees, all the vegetation. And that's, we heard it today, is very important for a lot of, or for almost every city, to have a good overview of all their vegetation, of all their trees they have in their city. And that means not just, let's say I have a million square meters of vegetation, but I have every single tree. I know where it stands. I know what height it has. I know what diameter the tree has. And that can be modeled pretty well from these data sets. Also, low texture areas can be modeled pretty well because we have the LiDAR. The LiDAR supports the acquisition. Moving to Tallinn, that was a bit the starting point. On the sensor side, Tallinn project started beginning of this year. The tender was design of workflow and data flow for 3D digitization of Tallinn city buildings, and creation of a detailed 3D model. So that's quite a lot, a long title, a long offer. And if you look into the project, it's subdivided in two parts. One part, part one, is an update concept, but I will better start with the part two, that's in 3D city model. So the goal is to model the whole city of Tallinn with LOD 2.2, show you a bit of a definition on this, models, and having all these models texturized. In addition to this, modeling about 100 important buildings in LOD3 quality that comes on top. And what we added to the project, it was not in the tender, but we need some data to do all this work. We do aerial hybrid data acquisition and all the processing to get the data to be able to model all the other things. Then, after modeling, the world is going on, so there will be an update necessary for the city, and we develop, that's an ongoing thing, we develop a whole concept on what needs to be tendered out, what needs to be written for somebody who needs to update the 3D model. And therefore, it's very helpful because we need our definitions that we have in our production workflow and put it into a general document and say, okay, that's the parameters how we did it, and we adjusted with the city of Tallinn and built a concept that the next one then really can follow and really knows within a tender process, within an offer, okay, this is needed, and we have all the details how to move on, how to offer an updated city model, maybe a whole one for the whole city or just for parts. There are different options available. I don't speak much about this part one. That's an ongoing thing, and I believe, also looking into the timing, the 3D city model, how we do it, how it looks like, it's of much more interest for you. So let's jump into this. That's just a bit of an overview of how we do the update concept. We have a lot of workshops, we discuss a lot of it. We have regular meetings here in Tallinn and on Teams. But going into the city modeling, that's some steps that need to be done. Everything starts for us, if we do a 3D model, with the aerial mapping flight. To fly, you need to plan your flight, you need to do the flying. After flying, it goes into data processing. That means GNSS IMU processing, what sometimes is difficult in these days, in these areas, with jamming, with spoofing of GNSS. It's a bit of a difficulty, but we succeeded here. Then you need to do the LiDAR processing, the image processing. Then it comes into the modeling for the buildings. I go into details here. That's LOD 2.2, and we have the LOD 3 modeling, where I also show you a bit of it. If you look into the status of the project, the flying is already done, the processing of the base data is done, and we are in the middle of the processing of the LOD 2s and the LOD 3, so I really can show you some first examples. I think even the city of Tallinn haven't seen them before, so it's really a first thing. A bit flight planning, what have we done? We use the city mapper, that's the sensor I showed to you. We have a really high GSD. GSD means the ground sample resolution. That's the smallest details that are in your imagery, and that is below 4 centimeter. And that's really detailed. I will show you some examples as well. Getting this, you need to fly a bit about 1,000 meters above ground. And that also gives you a lot of LiDAR points. If you have a powerful LiDAR, we have about 50 points per square meter. That means about every 7 centimeters you have a point on ground. That's really a lot of points. If you look into the data acquisition, here you see the aircraft that was used. It's a Diamond aircraft. We had a cooperation with a partner of a flying company from Poland. It's called OPGK. They used their city mapper to do the flying here. The data acquisition was between May 2 and May 8 this year. It was still leave off, so it was right in the beginning of the vegetation period. We were really lucky that we had good weather, clear sky. Everything could be done within 3 flying days, 4 missions. And you see the area here in all the flight lines that have been used. And now it becomes a bit denser because I put every single exposure point onto the map. And you can read it here. It's about 100,000 imagery. Every exposure produces 5 imagery, so it's about 20,000 points where we took this nadir image and the 4 oblique imagery, GSD 4 centimeter LiDAR points, about 50 points per square meter. Very often more. That depends a bit on the overlap of the flight. If you look into the general workflow, it goes into the processing. We do LiDAR image processing, the trajectory processing. We do, for every step, our QC, so we check the data. We have a so-called ingest, where we use the raw data from the camera, from the sensor, transfer it into real imagery, real point clouds. We do, again, a review of the data in the highest quality level. We do area triangulation. That means we need to really adjust the geometry of the data for the image, but also for the LiDAR to make it simultaneous, synchronized. We really put it together, LiDAR and image data. And from this, you could do the product generation. We haven't done it so far, but I will show you a bit more about products that can be derived. We use this aerial imagery and the LiDAR data for our production, and also provided it to Estonia Land Board for further processing. So this is a screenshot of the area triangulation. People dealing with photogrammetry are familiar with this. You get a report on the accuracy, on the geometry where you have weak areas. Everything that is green is perfect. Where it gets yellow, it has a bit less connections, but everything within very high accuracy levels. And you see towards the edges, you get a bit red. That's not critical, but usually in the edge you have less overlap and less imagery. So that means it's not the perfect there, but you extend your flight lines over the project area. So that's not a problem at all. If we look into some of the statistics for the nerds between us, if we look onto the accuracies, I said it was a flight with about 4 centimeters, and we have a accuracy on the control points, but also on the checkpoints, that is about half a pixel, so really high accuracy in the whole block. We got a lot of ground control from Land Board, so that was the deal. We got the points, they got the data. I think a fair deal. It saved us from going into the city and measure ground control point. So really good results, accuracies. Yeah, I think that's something really a surveyor loves to see, half a pixel of accuracy. Looking into some samples of the imagery, I hope you can see the quality. I selected one imagery from the zoo here. The building we are in is not in the image. I was not sure which building it is, so I just selected one. And on the right side, you see a bit of the details. One of the images is 40,000 by 10,000 pixels, so it's quite a lot of details, and you see a lot of things there. You also see what it means to fly in a leaf-off period. Everything does not look that nice because we don't have this pleasant green color that you usually have in a summer flight when all the vegetation, all the trees have the leaves on and all these nice colors. But for our purposes, it was important to fly without the leaves because if you have the trees with the full covered in front of a building and you need this as a texture, you have a lot of occlusions and cannot use or don't have a good texturing for the buildings afterwards. So from this point of view, this a bit more depressive image kind is best. Another example from the old town where you can look into the square and see all the people. You even see all the single stones on the main square here. So it's really a lot of details that you can take out this imagery. The two examples here were nadir imagery, so looking straight down. And one more example, also from the old town, from an oblique imagery where you see this 45 degrees angle that gives you a really nice perspective onto the objects that you can afterwards use for texturing all the buildings. Then, what I said, we also had LiDAR data. That's one example of the LiDAR data, just colorized with the height. An important feature to notice is that you have not only the ground, but you also see a lot of LiDAR points in the facades, and that comes from the technology that we are using. Our LiDAR is a circular thing. That means it looks 20 degrees from nadir and thus circles, so it always looks into the vertical objects as well. And it can penetrate through vegetation. What you easily can see here, that's a profile through a bit of vegetation where you see all the ground points, but you see also all the structure in the vegetation, a lot of details, and I think it's a great example where you really can use LiDAR data for detailed modeling of, for example, vegetation parameters. Another profile where you see a bit more the details that you get on the walls. So also in this profile you see all the walls and facades of the buildings, and you also see a lot of points on the roofs that we later need for the 3D modeling. Generation of building models. What does it mean? What is a building model? I mentioned it before, and I believe a lot of you have already seen this picture from a PhD from Philip Bilecki. He defines the LOD2 and the LOD3 with different subcategories. And for our project, we defined the LOD2 as a LOD22, and also the LOD3 as a LOD32 models. Most important for me is the LOD2, where we have these structures on the roofs from a certain size to be modeled. Also, if there are extensions on the buildings, they are also modeled. If we have substructures of buildings, they are modeled, and we have detailed modeling of roof types. I will show it later. If you look a bit above the LOD1, that is the current state of the Tallinn city model. Not in the old town, there we have already the LOD3 detailed modeled, but for the whole city we just have these block models, and we want to replace it by these detailed models. Here you see a bit more in detail what it means. The whole process, I don't want to bother you with all the details. I go just through the process that we use. I do it fast because it's a bit technical, but I want to show it, what it means to model a whole city in a certain kind of details. We speak about, I think it's about 100,000 or even more buildings, so it's quite a lot that we need to do. It's quite some manual work. We do it with our colleagues in India. That also meant that we need to cut out all the sensitive areas. So that is also done. I haven't mentioned it, but that is an important part of the whole workflow, really to give our colleagues in the production only what they are allowed to see, and that means everything that is not classified. Everything what is classified is not needed to be modeled, so it's, at least from this point of view, quite okay, quite easy to do. As a software tool, we use our internal tool that comes with the sensor. It's HexMap City Modeler. For the city modeler, you use building footprints, you use stereo imagery, and you use 3D data to model your buildings. All starts with a building footprint. In our case, we decided not to use the wall footprint, but to use the roof outline as a building footprint. That can be defined, and as we work with aerial data, usually the roof outline is easier to model. It stretches, it makes buildings sometimes a bit larger if there is a roof overhang, but from a practical point, it's the best solution to do it for a whole city. Then we have our LiDAR data, and we also could use 3D data from semi-global matching, but as the LiDAR point cloud is dense enough, we used the LiDAR data to model the building, to model the walls, and I will go a bit further, and to select what is the most suitable, the best roof primitive that could be used for a building, and that will be taken. Usually one building primitive for a more complex building is not enough, so we need to subdivide our buildings into smaller parts and then use different primitives for the whole building. I'll show you more examples on this. There are other roof primitives available in our process, and if you look around through a city, you really need a lot of different primitives because buildings are quite different. We do a QC, we have a 3D editor where we really check what is going on, is everything good enough? Then we do the texturing, we really use the oblique imagery to texture our buildings, and you will be impressed about the quality, how buildings look like with this texture on it. For the texture, we really make sure that we take the best oblique imagery with the least occlusion. So in this case, if we want to model the little building, the texture from aircraft 1 or from the image 1 is not suitable because all the information for the little building is occluded by the big building. So we need to use the image from the second exposure, and all these things are calculated to get the best texture for our building in the end. Some parameters need to be set. It's not Tallinn, we are not at that step. That was a different project in Switzerland. That's the building model, the 3D buildings, first without texture, intersected with the terrain model, and then the texture is mapped on it, and all the buildings are single objects that are modeled either as OBJ or later as a CityGML, what will be our preferred format here. And that's what we see here. We go into the export of the data as OBJ and or CityGML. Let's go to Tallinn itself. Now we see imagery and screen dumps from the project, from the production. So it starts with the modeling of the footprints, as you see here, the green and the blue ones. The red crosses are for objects that do not fit a certain size. So there is a minimum building size that we model. Everything that is smaller will not be modeled. We also use existing buildings to get the building number. It's a so-called TAR ID that every building in Estonia has, and we intersect it with this. We use these building footprints as an initial building or footprint, and then extend it, and that is what you see on the right side. There are some buildings that have a bit mix of different rectangles, and that means if we have more complex buildings, we need to subdivide our roof into different parts to be able to use the right building primitives. So again, some examples where we modeled different parts of the building for the later roof primitive matching. And what we do then, we check for QC. That means if we have the building footprints, then we use the 3D data to check what is possible, and then there's an automatic process checking the quality of every single model. And here you see the colorization. The green gives us a calculated quality of above 80, the yellow one above 50, and the reds are quite low quality with 10. And that gives some indication where we need to focus our manual rework that usually is necessary. Bit of a table to control everything. And after having this automatic analysis, it goes into the manual 3D editing work. That means we really look into our imagery together with the roof model and do it in 3D with the stereo model if the roof type really fits the reality, and do some adjustments here as well. We need at that point the stereo, otherwise we will have the tilting of the buildings from the central perspective in the imagery. So that means what is done in the QC. On the left side, you see the automatic derived 3D model, and on the right side, you see the corrected one where really the roof parts fit together, the dormers are correctly modeled, the texture fits the roof. That's really a Tallinn building here that was corrected within our QC workshop or work. Again here, the automatic model generation failed a bit. The QC discovered the wrong roof type and corrected it manually so that you have a really good 3D model of this smaller building. Also, you see it in a colorized mode, what is going on here. The larger green building somehow goes under the yellow one and is not really cut at the right one, or right point. So it goes a bit beyond it should. So we really need to correct these things as well. Looking into examples, that's a first test area or area that we did. It's just the harbor area or the along the coastline. It's the old prison and museum for where a submarine is located, and a really new built up modern part of the new city here. Let me show you some more details that you get the idea on the quality of the 3D models. You see, even with these flat roofs, it's not just a flat roof that is modeled, but if you have these larger balconies or terrace or whatever, these details are modeled and textured in the right way. And this is the big advantage of having real texture. It shows, or it looks like has so many details. In the end, it's just a plain facade, but with this good texture, it gives you all this information, and your brain interpolates or puts the additional information in it, and you get a really good feeling on how these buildings are look like in reality. Another example, or more details here, the whole prison modeled. So you see, this is one model here because it has one idea, and we need to put it together into one model, and that makes it really complex, and you cannot do it in a fully automatic way. So there is always manual work needed for these things. See the details again here, and all this great texture that is put on the facades. Also with this quite complex, really strange roof type or roof shape that you have on this former bunker, I think, or hall. And if you look into the details, it's really amazing what you can do in this workflow and how much details you get. One would think that also looks like the LOD3 models almost. So that was my first impression as I saw these examples. Looking a bit the other side around, also all the details. You have these more not flat roofs, the other side, and more details here. So that was the LOD3 modeling. I think the results are really promising what we get out of this data set. One little example from LOD3 modeling, how we do it. Again, the workflow, most thing is done in a manual way, so we model the whole structure, the whole building in 3D Studio Max, and add in this situation for the LOD3, we add artificial texture, because that keeps us consistent with the existing LOD3 models that are already existent from the Old Town. And we modeled the stadium. That was one of the first we did for Tallinn. A really complex one. It's a lot of work to do, and it has a lot of texture files in it. And if you look into these details, I just looked into the internet and took the real image of it. And I think, except the yellow is not the perfect color, I think it's really in a level of detail that's amazing for a 3D model. I have 2.5 minutes left. I want to show a few things, a few possible applications, and I also want to start some discussion. One is real texture versus artificial texture. So that's something, if you build a 3D model of your city for your digital twin, think about what you want to use. Artificial texture is more generalized, but it has no trees in front of it. So you don't put vegetation onto your facades, and you have no occlusions and so on. So there might be a pro and con for the one or the other. Also, if we look into the artificial texture, and I took the street view imagery, that's from the existing Tallinn Old Town model. It's not the perfect texture, but you can get something that is very close to reality. And I think that's for, if you really want to have something without any errors in the texture, you need to use artificial texture. Again, more details here, but everybody needs to decide by himself what is the right way. I also want to bring one point up. With all the data that we have, we can do LOD modeling, so vector modeling, but we could also do 3D mesh modeling. 3D mesh, model of the whole city, all the streets, all the stuff that is on it, without holes. And sometimes that's also quite good product. And a city needs to decide what is more important. Is it a LOD? Is it a 3D mesh? Or is it probably both of it? So I think he took it from the webpage from Helsinki, the comparison of both. Usually the LOD model are isolated, so you need imagery where you can put it on. You need to model all the other infrastructure like trees, like street furniture and so on. If you don't do it, the buildings will look a bit isolated, like in the example I showed from Tallinn. If you have the 3D mesh, everything is in it. But it has differences. It's difficult to carry information, to carry semantics in the 3D mesh model, what is easier in the LOD model on this way. So, but modern approaches show that you can combine pretty well also a 3D mesh model with semantics that are on a vector data set. So there are a lot of possibilities that you could have in this, a bit of a clash what you better like, or if you want to have both. Again, one example from Klagenfurt, that's in Austria. Here we put onto the mesh model solar potential, and we did it in this way that we not just calculated the solar potential for a whole roof, but we checked how many of standard panels we can place on a roof, taking into account the windows that we have, the chimneys, the dormers, and whatever is there on the roof, and then also checking, is there any occlusion, is there any shadowing over the day that comes onto the panels, and from this the potential energy that you can produce will be calculated. So that's one application that think of. Here I put a bit together the LOD on the one side and the mesh model on the other side. From my point of view, they can live together. The one carries the semantics, the other is nice for viewing purposes to really, gives you the nice view. But people need to decide. If you do it with a LOD model, you always need to take care on the underlying image information. If you look, and that's understandable, here a traditional ortho image with a bit of a tilted roof or moved roof through the perspective was used, and the LOD model was put on top. So there is a bit of roof shining on the street, and so if you want to use LOD models, you should use a true orthophoto as a underlying information. If you look here, the difference, traditional ortho with the tilted perspective buildings, on the other side the true ortho that has the right geometry where everything fits together in a correct way. Again, traditional ortho, true ortho, so you directly see the differences. If you have all these base products, you can do a lot of products, a lot of solutions. I will jump quite quick through it because it's already zero. You have LiDAR point clouds, you can 3D mesh, you can DSM, true orthos, even super mesh. That's a combination of aerial mesh together with a mobile mapping data set with a lot of details. You can do the building extraction we have already seen. You can do a land cover. We do it driven by artificial intelligence to get about 25 land cover classes. And we have it in a so-called X-ray view. As we do it from the original imagery, we can also look a bit from the side underneath the trees, and we get, for example, the impervious areas under the trees also classified, and we have a kind of 3D classification from imagery. We can do a tree extraction. So what we do in our automatic process is having modeled every tree with the height, with the position and the crown diameter, what is very helpful for a lot of applications. It works really great on single trees, on alleys. It's not perfect if you have these dense forest-like groups of trees, then it's a bit more of an interpolation. You can do smart tree monitoring from this, getting every tree and building it into a dashboard, into really information, assessing the dangerousness of a tree. What is if a storm kicks down a tree? What is the danger? Is there any infrastructure nearby? Who is responsible for the tree if you intersect it with cadastral information? We can do planning. We have seen this quite sometimes today. We can also use these things for wind circulation modeling. We have also seen it from Uwe in the presentation before. Can do similar things here. You can do this with a LOD, but also with a mesh model. And you can use it for 5G network planning. You can do, that's I've already shown, solar potential. You can do viewshed analysis with the 3D data. And that's, I think, another example of wind circulation and tree modeling and everything done in a more or less automatic way in New York City, where you have all the trees in the Central Park. You modeled all the single buildings. In this case, everything was modeled automatically. So it's not perfect, but it's a quick result for vector modeling. You can use this also then for getting kind of green mass indices for a certain area where you can calculate impervious surfaces versus green space. You can do again the wind circulation modeling. You can simulate what happens if you build a big building within this wind stream and so on. So really a lot of potential application. And what I would always advocate for is you need this aerial image information to have the base, to have the framework for any other detailed information that you usually would need. You will need, for example, a street view campaign. You will need your sensor data. You will probably need some drone data to close a bit gaps or to get more details for certain areas. And all these things will also make it into our concept that we write. If we just want to update a little space, probably a drone is the better way. If you want to update the whole city, then we go for aerial flight or whatever is the best solution. And that brings me to an end. Thank you for your attention. It's pretty late, and I'm happy that so many people stayed here. And I hope I could give you a bit of information on what it means to do such a big project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm not going to hold you much longer here, but Uwe will probably stay here so you can all ask your questions from him now. But I will just say a couple of ending words, and I won't hold you here much longer. So this was the end of our Tallinn Digital Twin Conference. We want to thank all the presenters. Let's make a round of applause for them once more. And of course, I want to thank all of you for participating today. I hope you got a lot of useful insights, and you can develop your own projects further and better. So without much words, let's move together to a brighter and better future. Thank you all.